Hello, everyone. I'm sorry it's been a while. Again, Doctor Who tried to kill me. It failed, but just as season 2 was wrapping up, I got COVID and bronchitis and was just kind of out of action for a couple of months. And since then, I've just been kind of trying to catch up on things. So yeah, I wanted to talk about Doctor Who while it's still sort of a thing. I covered the first half of the season on this channel, and I just wanted to come back and talk about the second half of the season and those 4 episodes, how the season stands overall, and where the show's at right now, because frankly it's not in a great spot, and I'd like to dive into why. Let's start with the story and the engine, the 5th episode of the season. I don't know if I just had a really busy week when this came out, or if it just got very quickly drowned out by the discourse from future episodes, but I don't really know what the consensus is on this one. I thought it was alright. I thought it was a bit of a mixed bag. There's clearly some juice in this premise, in the setup. I think the kind of storytelling nature of it, the animated window that brings these stories to life, the setting of it, the texture of it, I think that's all really positive. And I think, especially the way it opens, they're all telling these stories, it feels quite relaxed, and then you realise it really isn't. I really like the window that brings the stories to life with the animation there. I thought it was very funny that the Doctor just loses his mind and tries to get it to depict a weeping angel, just derail the whole story. There are some key elements to this where I think you really do feel the benefit of some diversity behind the scenes. I think, the barbershop as this kind of community hub and this kind of place for coming together isn't something that Russell T Davies would have come up with, and I think it adds a real kind of flavour, a kind of texture, an authenticity to this story that I think you definitely get. And I think you also have that moment of the Doctor talking about race, and it's nice when these things are being done by people that might know what they're talking about, and not just Russell, who wants to appear to be the hero of all minorities, and isn't always, very well-meaning, I'm sure, but isn't always the most kind of qualified to make these points. So I think it's nice we get that scene with him and Belinda, and the 15th Doctor is talking about his skin colour and what that has actually meant for his life as the Doctor. I think it's maybe a bit... It doesn't feel right that Belinda lets him go on this mission, though. It doesn't feel like this kind of sidetrack thing would make any sense for her. Like, she's very much, get me home, why the hell are we in Nigeria? I think it's clearly been written as a normal episode and then worked into the overall story with a bit of like, oh, I know we're doing this, but can we just go do a normal Doctor Who? The setting being like 2019 is that as well, because I think it's clearly been written as the present day, almost maybe even filmed as the present day, and then they were like, oh wait, the whole point is that we can't go to present day Earth, so they ADR a bit of like, it's 2019 actually, guys, it's a period episode, this is the most normal year we can do, that's basically the present day, but it's pre-COVID. Challengers did it as well. Like, it's just like, 2019, before you had to worry about all that stuff that then happened. I don't know when 2019 won't be present day enough for us, but for now, I guess it still is. But there are other positives to this story. There are a couple of little details I liked. I thought the barbershop being in kind of 2 places at once was really cool. That the exterior was completely deserted and the inside seemed completely normal. That it's a classic Doctor Who thing. I can't think of any other example, but it's just a kind of striking bit of imagery. Just something not quite right there that I like. I like the Doctor being able to glide through that market, cut through everything. He's saying hi to everyone, and then when Belinda tries it, she's just kind of bumping into everyone, unable to get through. I liked that there's the barber betrays the Doctor, really, and that's kind of why the Doctor's there. And I think I like that the Doctor is central to that kind of personal drama, because I think Ncuti plays it quite well. And it gives him something to actually work with, the Doctor as a kind of character on a personal level, rather than just on a kind of, I am the Doctor kind of thing. And I think it's nice to see that Ncuti's a very accomplished actor and can pull that kind of thing off. We saw the fugitive Doctor very briefly, and I think that's a fairly classy move, as far as like, this is the first episode to really deal with the Doctor's skin colour, and to include the other first Black Doctor in the story and in the narrative. It's a nice move. I didn't know how I felt about, like, it's a story that may be told one day. That felt a little bit kind of eye-rolly, but it would be nice to have that story told one day. I think it's really funny that all the kind of timeless child division stuff is something that they want to move away from, but the fugitive Doctor is something that we do want to see, so it makes her impossible. And it's why she's only appeared in person once. Like, she's in The Fugitive of the Judoon, and then every time we've seen her since then, it's like flashback, hologram, memory, manifestation, consciousness, whatever. But a nice moment and a nice surprise, even if I think maybe you could have worked her into the narrative a little bit more. You could have actually had a flashback to her on an adventure doing a story that makes her relevant to the plot. You know, I'm only asking for that because they gave us a little bit. I think, were she not in the story at all, you wouldn't question it. So maybe this is better than nothing. I'm just an ungrateful fan. I think that's it. Another thing I really loved was the story of the maps being kind of braided into the hair. I thought, that's a really interesting detail to include. It's an interesting story. The Doctor looks really cool with it. Like, it's such an interesting kind of visual, kind of historical element. Again, maybe something that Russell wouldn't have brought to the episode, so it's nice that someone else did. So there's quite a lot to like here. Not at all without positives. Not a bad episode by any means, but I don't think I personally can say it's a good one. I thought the stakes were really weird. I thought that, like, what's the threat hanging over this episode? That the guy's gonna destroy all the gods. And we just have to be told and reassured that would be bad. Like, I know every god we've ever met is awful, but this would have serious trust me, this would have serious consequences. We can't really go into detail on what those consequences would be, and why we should the whole point of this is to save the gods, to save humanity. But yeah, no, that would be bad. I thought there was that kind of fake out where that guy, I can't remember anyone's name now. He was claiming to be all these gods of mischief and chaos and all that, and then the Doctor's like, "No, you're not." And I thought I quite liked that fake out, and that the way he just kind of deflated and was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not." But then it's like, "Oh no, I'm not a god. You caught me. I'm just the guy that kind of gave them all their power." And it's like, is that not better? That feels almost a little bit more impressive, but we're playing it as yeah, you're right, I'm just a stupid creator of the gods. I don't know. I think one of the disappointing elements of this story is that, like, the setup feels primed for a proper bottle episode of Doctor Who, just character-driven, dialogue-driven drama and tension. It's a small cast in a small location, and they're basically trapped there for the whole episode. So there's really no excuse for half of these characters to be absolutely nothing, and for the kind of character drama that we do get to feel so naff for a lot of it. A lot of it just falls flat. A lot of it doesn't seem to exist at all. Belinda and that other character, and she whips out hurt people as a lovely little refrain, and it's like, it feels like the writer saw it on Facebook or something and was like, I'm using that. That is going to blow people's minds. And although I said it was nice that Ncuti was able to give us some kind of real character moments as the Doctor, he kind of just keeps going back and forth between that soft intensity and the bigger, more generic, way less interesting, I am the Doctor and I'm doing all this intensity, which I don't think is something he does well. It also feels like Belinda isn't in this episode enough, or she's in it too much. It kind of feels in the setup like it's going to be like Midnight or The Lodger, where the companion is just off somewhere else or trapped on the TARDIS doing something else, and you see maybe glimpses of her, but she's not relevant. But at a certain point, she does just join the main story, but continues to have nothing to do. And it's kind of like, is she here? Should she be here? If she's actually in the episode, she should play a bigger role. If she's, if it's a Belinda Light episode, she should play a smaller role because it just kind of exposes how little she has to do. I thought the Belinda of it all was a bit off. I think the episode loses its way even more as we get further into the engine and the Nexus and the spider, the big spider, the small spider, the web. I think it all starts to feel very rushed. It all starts to feel like its focus is in the wrong place, and just kind of like the stuff we're getting is unsubstantial and kind of rushed, too slow, just all over the place in a way that doesn't feel right. It feels messy and doesn't kind of hit the beats it needs to as a kind of satisfying audience experience, I guess. I think the Doctor's life being something that can sustain this engine because it's this never-ending story was pretty nice. I quite like that. It's a little bit sweet. It's a little bit sickly, but I didn't mind it. I thought it was like, yeah, fair enough. I didn't love, though, that the day was saved with just clips of Doctor Who on the television. It feels like we've done that more than enough, and it doesn't hit anymore to see like a montage and go, wow, he's so epic, and that's why we win. Yeah, no, I've had enough of that. Something I like that did stick with me was the idea that a story was a beating heart inside a brain. But that's an idea I like more than the execution or its relevance to this episode. And I think, to be honest, that is how I feel about the episode as a whole. I like all the ideas we're getting more than the episode itself. It's a fine episode, you know. I think on the one hand, it feels quite fresh. It's a nice reminder of why it's good to have new talent on the show. But its shortcomings are very familiar. It feels very messy. It feels like the climax is a total dud. It feels like it lets down Belinda, and those things are all very RTD. So it's kind of like new talent, same problems, you know. So I think the value of it as this kind of, wow, it's a new take on Doctor Who, it's limited, and I think that's a real shame because this episode could have been something special. And they're cowards for not just randomly having Mrs. Flood in the market on Nigeria. They had to put her into Belinda's flashback. But yeah, on to the next episode. So, Interstellar Song Contest. This is one that I have quite a lot to say about, so strap in. For a lot of it, it's pretty good stuff, you know. It's a fun premise, it's a fun setting that is pretty well realised, given, you know, the way Doctor Who tends to look and feel. In the trailers, I thought it all looked really cheap, but in the actual episode, I was really impressed. You know, this kind of massive scale arena does feel pretty well brought to life here. It might be one of the best showcases of the modern era's VFX that we have. I thought the songs looked and sounded terrible, but it's Eurovision, so that is kind of accurate, I guess. I quite liked Dugga Do. I know in the weeks since the Doctor Who, they've really tried to force Dugga Do as a meme, and that's kind of really put people off it. But in the moment, I thought it was fun, especially over Belinda's breakdown. It was fun seeing Rylan. I mean, I don't know Rylan very well as a celebrity. I know he's a big Doctor Who fan, so it's nice to have him here. He's pretty good at playing himself, you know. He's pretty, not just the hosting side of things, but he plays that kind of uncertainty and the bizarreness of the situation as well as he needs to. So I thought that was fun. Graham Norton as well. I thought, oh, he's good at the comedy acting, isn't he? And then realised, of course he is. That's how he started. The episode features what is probably the coolest moment in the whole season, and it's when the gravity shield bursts and you just see all the people just rising up into space. I mean, I think the fact it's in the background of a shot where Ncuti's in focus is incredible. It's just that kind of, oh my god, look what's happening behind him. Just a really kind of smart way to do this. I said whoa out loud, and you know, I don't react out loud to anything, especially not this series, but I just thought that was incredible. Generally, I just really enjoyed the feel of this episode. It felt good. The moment-to-moment vibe of it was really strong and felt like Doctor Who in its kind of most fun, pure form. I thought the characters that we spend time with, the side characters, felt proper, you know, the first Russell T Davies era kind of side characters that you see in one episode and they kind of stick with you as memorable. You know, we meet a lot of side characters in this show. It's a new supporting cast every week. And I think to have them stand out at this stage is really great. I mean, I liked spending time with all the players in this episode, but the couple that the Doctor spent time with, I think Gary and Mike, they felt great. They felt extra special. There was something just so fun and authentic and real and memorable, and I don't know, that side of things felt really great, and just like I was just watching a version of the show that kind of hasn't existed for quite a while. And that's not to say that I haven't enjoyed what we've had up to this point in this era. Obviously, I've not enjoyed all of it, but I think there have been great moments, but this just felt kind of really nostalgic, not in that it was bringing back familiar elements within the story, but like within the feel of it. It felt like a real return to good vibes Doctor Who. The Doctor using the confetti cannon to survive in space felt great, and I think that's another moment that could have been cheap, but it's sold by, the visuals do sell it, and but the music and I think Ncuti's whole kind of portrayal of it just brings it into this kind of fun moment rather than, silly. Obviously reminded me of The Last Jedi. I like to be reminded of The Last Jedi, so they get points there as well. There's a bit where Mike lays out just how impossible this situation is to get out of, to resolve, to survive, and the Doctor's response to what he says is the moment, I think, of this era that got me the most pumped up, the most hell yeah, the most kind of excited and enthused. And he says something like, to sort this out you'd need some insane genius, and the Doctor just goes, hello, I'm the Doctor. As that moment happened, I literally thought we might be watching the first episode of our new showrunner, the audition episode for Juno Dawson to take over. She clearly has something that other writers are lacking. Potentially even Russell T Davies at this point is lacking at bringing a real spark to this show. It felt like this could be something beyond just this episode. And that was quite an exciting way to feel. Unfortunately, I didn't feel it for the whole episode. And at a certain point, I stopped feeling it altogether. Because, unfortunately, this episode is bad and sucks. And I don't like it. I think it is a sickeningly stupid and tone-deaf script that fails spectacularly at everything of substance that it's actually trying to do. Because we have these people as our villains that are Hellions, and they're a race that they meet a lot of prejudice because they've got a violent reputation, and throughout the episode you find out a little bit more about maybe why they're like that, or kind of their motives behind the violence and all that. And it feels like it's on track for a kind of well-meaning, if a little kind of tacky allegory for something going on in the real world. But it ends up a lot worse than that and a lot more harmful. Even before the episode starts to get into the backstory details that bring kind of these real-world parallels to light, you get little moments like the girlfriend of the main baddie has kind of infiltrated the song contest's staff, and there's a boss that's quite racist to her, and she's proved right. She's like, I took a chance hiring a Hellion, and you showed us that stereotype is absolutely correct. It's like, oh, great, good optics there, guys. We learn a little bit more about the Hellions. They're from a planet that's just been destroyed, and a population that's been wiped out basically by this corporation that is involved with the song contest. And, they say things like, the Hellions brought it on themselves, they're so violent, they did it to themselves, all that kind of thing. And obviously, I think there is a parallel there that comes immediately to mind. And I think you can say people are making excuses for the optics of this episode and what it does with those parallels later on by saying, this was written a long time ago. And yeah, maybe the script predates us hearing about Gaza every day, but it does not predate Israel's involvement in Eurovision, and that being a kind of continually controversial subject surrounding Eurovision since Israel joined Eurovision, which was long before this episode was written. So I think to make the excuse of like, no, this was before all that started, this started quite a long time ago, and I don't think you can write a Eurovision episode about how there's an aspect of Eurovision that people are protesting, and there are people that were wiped out that... I think it's something the episode wants us to think about, and making excuses for, saying, it's just a coincidence that unfortunately things in the Middle East kicked off just as things were happening. No, I think this is something the episode wants us to have in mind, so I'm going to have it in mind and have my problems with the episode as a result. Because the Hellions want revenge against the corporation. And frankly, fair enough. But like all villains who may start to sound like they're having a fair point and a real motive, they have to be pushed a little further by the script into total maniacal, no coming back from that kind of villainy. Pure evil. They want to kill everyone at the contest's stage and everyone who's watching the competition across the galaxy. It's like, okay, you've got a real point, so just to make sure we're not on your side, your plan is to kill 3 trillion people. And it's such an outrageously, cartoonishly evil plan that it just kind of evaporates all the nuance and, substance from the story, from the narrative. And the Doctor really hates this guy. He's shouting shouting at him, he's, physically hurting him. And I'm not sure the episode really thinks the Doctor is wrong to hate him at this level. Maybe that he goes a bit far, but I don't know. It's a side of the 15th Doctor we've never seen before. It's kind of how he'd treat a Dalek. It's that kind of Christopher Eccleston whacking the Dalek kind of thing. And on paper, cool, that's something we've not seen this Doctor do. It's a step further. It's always fun when the Doctor goes too far. But in reality, is this the kind of character we want to see the Doctor totally lose his mind at? An orphan refugee of a genocide that is being ignored and supported by all the supposed goodies in this story and this competition. And this isn't a Dalek. This isn't the Doctor's arch nemesis. This is a young, human-shaped man who can feel real pain, and watching him be tortured feels like a really uncomfortable watch in a way that, people say, oh, that's the point, Joe. I don't think the episode is interested in dealing with how uncomfortable that is. I think, it's that kind of Doctor goes too far, companion reins him in thing. But the Doctor goes way too far, and Belinda sort of shrugs it off as like, wow, good thing you're back to normal, Doctor, because that was a bit scary. And the Doctor's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm the last of the Time Lords, and I hate when things are pure evil. And it's like, Jesus, that's not the way to deal with the fallout of this moment. So yeah, the idea that it goes too far and that's the point, I'm not happy with that as an explanation. I think it only thinks it's too far because the Doctor lost his cool on someone who deserved it, rather than, was wrong about someone who didn't. Because I think the script is on board with the Doctor when he comes out with things like, revenge is just an excuse because your cold, filthy heart just wants to kill. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like this guy's got a pretty good reason for revenge, for wanting to do something. Obviously, it's been taken to a ridiculous extreme, but to say that there's nothing of substance behind what you feel, you're just a murderer, man. I don't know. When this episode came out, you had people online, including myself, voicing their discomfort with this part of the episode and the Doctor's treatment of Kid. And you had people in the replies saying, oh, so you think he was right to kill 3 trillion? Don't you know that's evil? And it's like, it's not real. You don't have to argue on the episode's terms here. It's not a set of real events that you have to judge as if they were real events. I'm arguing with the script that set the episode's terms. I think the real resolution of this story is that one of the good ones, one of the Hellions that we like, does a non-violent solution. She sings a beautiful song about her homeland, and everyone's so sad. And it's like, oh, now we all know about the suffering of the Hellions, and that surely that's more valuable than acting on it. Doing something to destroy the corporation. Come on, guys, why can't we all be a bit more like that? A lovely, peaceful solution. And it's like, okay, is the corporation going to be dealt with? We're still at the competition that they fund, that is sponsored by them, supported by them. I don't think there's any indication from the episode that the people behind the genocide are actually going to be dealt with. It's just that now we know that not all Hellions are horrible, evil murderers. And I think the episode is scared to endorse anything more active and more productive than singing a song. So it frames the alternative to singing a song as mass slaughter of innocents across the galaxy. It says you're either one of the good ones or you're like Kid. It has to frame those two as the only options because the midpoint is scary. The midpoint is where things actually exist in the real world, and it's something that should be totally avoided by the BBC because otherwise you'll get complaints and taken off the air and investigations by the anti-Semitism board. Can I say that? Yeah. It reminded me of Andor and the Gorman storyline because that's one where they sing a beautiful song about their homeland and they get slaughtered anyway because that's what happens. And that's a show that's not afraid to say sometimes you need to do more than just sing. I do feel like the whole episode does just come apart because of this villain storyline, and not just because of the parallels, but I just think story-wise, what are we saying? What's the point of this? It's not interested really in dealing with all the ideas it's throwing our way. What message, what lesson is there? I think, protest the right way. Does the corporation get dealt with? No. Is it a point made that the corporation doesn't get dealt with? I don't think so. I don't know, it just wants to say, yes, we know that the corporation's bad, and then move on, which is actually incredibly realistic. The Doctor's rage is something that feels like it should be a lasting moment for the character, but it comes along way too quickly, is far too intense for the situation we're dealing with, and then just disappears without a trace, basically. It should really tear apart Belinda and the Doctor. Her witnessing that should really just disintegrate their relationship, but it just sort of doesn't. And speaking of Belinda, who the hell is she in this episode? Sethu is able to bring her spark to the character in some moments, but I think she's written incredibly out of character for a lot of it. Just in smaller moments, there's nothing broad to say Belinda would never do this, but she gets very excited that it's Eurovision. That kind of feels within the realm of possibility, but the Doctor's like, oh, I knew you'd enjoy it eventually, yeah, we'll stay. It's like, you've been doing this every week. You are enjoying it and staying. That doesn't feel particularly novel. She gets really excited about seeing Rylan. There's just little things that she doesn't quite feel like Belinda. And then it turns out that feeling wasn't totally unfounded, and that when Dawson wrote this episode, she didn't know anything about Belinda. She, didn't know who was playing her, really any character details, but said that was okay because the companion, anyone can write the companion, because the companion is just us. The companion is the audience stand-in. And it's like, for all the companions to say this about, Belinda is one that should be bringing a certain level of confrontation that she obviously doesn't here, because that's not how it works. And I think that companion stuff is nonsense, and I think it is kind of disqualifying as far as wanting to be a showrunner goes, if she even does want to be a showrunner. But I think it's potential. That's just not, that's the excuse you have to give when there's a wider production situation going on, that episode 6 of season 2, when writing that script, you don't know who the second build character is. That feels like it's not Juno Dawson's fault. That feels like a wider issue, which we may have to come on to slightly later on. Oh, and after all that cowardly, stupid propaganda, I guess, the Rani bi-generates. Great. Mrs. Flood is the Rani all along, and then she's 2 Mrs. Floods, 2 the Ranis. I don't know, that's naff and rubbish and laughably stupid, and the bi-generation looks really bad, and it was just such a sigh-inducing moment at the end of quite a lot of those. I don't know, maybe the rest of the episode made me angry, and that just made me go, oh, great, okay. On the one hand, great to do this in episode 6, get that out the way, so we're not just spending episode 7 building to a villain reveal, ticking it off, fine. Although we still actually do end up getting a bit of a drawn-out villain reveal in episode 7. I thought it was sad to take the fun, unique vibes of Anita Dobson as Mrs. Flood and then just replace her with a Rani, and I think this is just how the Rani always is, but just a generic Rani characterization that's just like, I'm evil and a time lady and I'm mean, and it's like, just could have walked straight out of a fan film, whereas Mrs. Flood has at least something strange about her. So what a great episode to also be the return of Carol Ann Ford as Susan. That, like, the vision of Susan in the TARDIS talking to the Doctor, that's some of the most naff, rubbish, embarrassing dreck that the show has ever done, and to bring it up even feels mean. And it's nothing against Carol Ann Ford, it's just, what are we doing here? It was embarrassing, and yeah, I think best to move on and forget that Susan was in this season at all, because it does neither of them any favours. So yeah, I don't like this episode. I think it's another week of weird, awful politics from a show that seems to be patting itself on the back for being the most progressive thing in the world. And I think it's one of those things that I always hear that annoying commenter at the back of my mind. Not anyone in particular, but lots of people just like, oh, just don't pay attention to the politics. It's like, the show wants you to. Right? The show thinks it's doing something really clever politically, so you have to engage with those politics on the level that they are presenting it to you. To pretend that we can separate the two when the show is so deliberately being political and praising itself for doing so, I might add. I think it's so stupid to pretend that we can separate the two. In a way, I think this is kind of the good episode bad politics thing that I said Lucky Day didn't quite manage, because I do think the good actually is good here, but it's just that the bad politics are worse here, so it cancels itself out and is about the same level, unfortunately. It kind of feels like if you take away any kind of we're making a point element to this, maybe it could have been good. You just have not a Dalek, but an outrageous evil villain with no backstory that relates to real world events. Maybe this all works. It's an evil, I'm going to kill a gazillion people because I'm evil. And then the Doctor hates that. And it's fun, it's camp, it's not the Doctor torturing a human being, it's the, oh, you dastardly foe, we're gonna get you. Maybe the whole episode works, but as it is, the whole episode doesn't work. And I think an episode that was able to give me such high hopes for Juno Dawson as a writer on the show, is something that I now think is so catastrophically bad and harmful and stupid and lazy, and I think it should be kind of disqualifying as far as, like, I don't necessarily think she should get another chance to write at this show. And I think that's an incredible thing to manage to do, to give me such high hopes and then a kind of, well, don't let them write again. Yeah, not great. Sorry. I hope the finale's good. Even after the previous episode, I went into Wish World pretty hopeful, pretty open-minded. I quite like a weird, messed up world. I like, familiar but not quite right elements. I think the Buffy episode, The Wish, comes to mind. I mean, the Trickster episodes, I always go on about those. What If? I like WandaVision, and now it's fun because we know that so does Russell T Davies. I know WandaVision didn't invent these things, but I think that very specific kind of gesturing towards, cracks, sinister cracks in a so-called happy retro suburban aesthetic, that happened very prominently very recently with WandaVision, and we know that Russell's been watching the Marvel shows to kind of understand what's going on in the zeitgeist, and Loki was a kind of thing he had on his mind. So I very much think this is a WandaVision inspired Doctor Who world. It's not a bad version of that, though. It's not a bad Doctor Who does WandaVision. I think as far as the setup goes and the world goes, I think I quite like, the Doctor and the companion as the husband and wife is quite fun. The Doctor going to his day job at Unit and the kind of retroified Unit set. That all seemed quite fun. I thought maybe, my one complaint there, the Vlinks, could have had an old-timey The Vlinks, could have had Clockwork The Vlinks, could have just had Nick Briggs in a suit sat up there. That's my complaint about the retro Unit set. But aesthetically and the music, I thought it was all quite strong. The inclusion of Mel in this world in this episode was a bit like, okay, why? I don't know, maybe they need a neighbour because Wanda had a neighbour, or that kind of sitcom world has a neighbour. I don't know, I feel like there's that post, it's a really funny post, and I'm not a BTS guy, but there's a post about BTS fan fiction and how it struggles to include all of the members, and it's like, it reminded me of that, and it had me thinking, like, why they got Mel driving the bus, why is Mel the next door neighbour? It feels a little strange. I like all the stuff on the TV with Conrad. I thought that kind of storytelling stuff was pretty good. I liked, telling the story of the Doctor. I'm always very pro calling him Doctor Who in the episodes. So, yeah, I liked that. But Conrad's role in the story itself is quite strange. It feels like he's not active enough in the actual narrative. It feels like this is an actor that's very capable of playing strength and playing that kind of sinister villain role, but he's very passive. He's kind of in that trance. He just kind of has stuff happen to him. And it made me kind of wish that he was really behind it all and that there wasn't that kind of Rani element as well, because he feels very compelling. And if he was the mastermind that having him on the TV kind of suggests he is, I think the episode would be much better for it. And I think the episode's best scene is the one he shares with Mrs. Flood. I think they're both really interesting actors and very compelling to watch on screen. And both of them are kind of sidelined into sub-villain category. She's the assistant to the Rani, and he has about as much agency as the baby that they've got fueling the Wish. And it just feels like we're getting a glimpse at a team-up that maybe could have been much stronger, but instead it's just two kind of side elements to a much more generic, as I said, Rani storyline. Because the main Rani really does just do nothing for me, and I'm sure she's a fine actor. this kind of monologuing, evil kind of exposition. And I know, there's that bit where she says, "This isn't just exposition, Doctor," and it's like Russell was writing it and went, "Well, there's a lot of exposition here. Let's acknowledge that." And it's like, this isn't a villain that says that kind of thing. She's not camp in that way. Mrs. Flood could pull it off, but no. I mean, I think everything in that bone beast temple structure with the Rani just feels really tedious, is the word. Although I do quite like that set, and I like those little alien or the Seeker characters, I think they're called, they've got their hands melded into the keyboards or whatever they're actually typing on. They're cool. The set's cool. Feels like they never really know how to shoot the set. Like, a good director could have made that look incredible, but it is just like, yeah, we've got good production design. Here it is in a big wide all the time. We have the Susan messages, we have the Jonathan Groff message, and that is just outrageously bad. I mean, it's him on a green screen. It feels like he's done it in a cupboard. Turns out he did it on the set while they were filming Rogue, which is incredible because it looks horrendous. And he doesn't look great, and it's just such an embarrassing moment of him reaching out to the Doctor. But he says, "I love you," or he tries to say it, or gets cut off or something. But I don't think Rogue does love the Doctor, and I don't think the Doctor does love Rogue, and I don't think that was the tragedy of that episode. I don't think it was sad because they loved each other and were torn apart. It was more a sense of mourning what could have been and was cut short before it was anything, or before it was anything close to love. And now I guess, Ncuti's gone, so Rogue is just trapped in that hell dimension, so this is just a last-minute reminder that he's here forever, unless, the next Doctor, Billie Piper, gets him out. We find out that the Vindicator going to all those places has actually caused the destruction of all this, which is just the same as last year. It's just the same as the Sutekh TARDIS going to all those places. So that's not great. Ncuti's reaction, the Doctor's reaction to the Rani is really rubbish. I think all of Ncuti's big reaction moments like that are bad. Like when he meets the Maestro and all that. He can't pull that off for some reason. He's clearly a good actor, but that kind of, "Oh my God, it's the Rani," really bad. Not, maybe it's just because what he's working with is so crap, But there's a bigger problem with this episode that overshadows all the other gripes I have with it, and kind of means that anything that may work in its favour is just wasted potential. And it's that there's no protagonist. The whole episode has this really aimless, wandering feel to it, because there's not really any kind of main character to cut through this story and make sense of it. The bulk of the screen time is spent with characters that are mostly just, like I said with Conrad, just passive. All the best examples of stories where something happens to the world that changes how things are feature a character who knows what has happened, or knows at least that things are different. They react to the changes and justify the changes having any relevance at all because someone actually knows how things are meant to be. You have Marty McFly in Back to the Future 2. You have Maria in the Trickster episode. You have Cordelia in the Buffy episode. And in this episode, Ruby is that. But she's not our protagonist. She's not really our focus enough. She has that kind of awareness of how things used to be, but she has a kind of three-way split between her, the Doctor, and Belinda, and she's not taking an active enough role in the narrative. She's not that important. And it's because her role in the story was clearly split in half. Half of it was clearly given to Belinda. I got in trouble on Twitter a few months ago for implying that there may have been some truth to the rumours that Millie Gibson had been fired from the show. There were kind of rumours all throughout. They plagued the production of the first season, and they were picked up by the tabloids, and they reported on it really horribly and tackily, and so I think people were very angry that I said, I was listening to the Mirror, because the Mirror had said she was a diva and all that. I wasn't listening to the Mirror. I was listening to other rumblings that had come my way that if you were paying attention, you would have heard. And it kind of seemed like maybe things were okay and that she'd be back in season 2, so clearly there was no problem. I think clearly there has been some sort of change of plan. I don't know what. I don't know. Hired, fired, quit, renegotiated. I don't know. But I think these seasons both bear the scars of some unplanned changes and some switcheroos and some maybe totally inventing a character of Belinda because Ruby was meant to be the season 2 companion. I think it would explain why this season mostly ignores Belinda. I don't know. I don't care to get into the specifics, but I think this episode in particular shows a kind of very, very specific kind of thing where Belinda and Ruby seem to share two halves of the same companion story. Belinda's story in this episode is about someone slowly realizing that the world they're in is wrong and slowly starting to remember the world there used to be. And then she runs out into the forest and screams as this kind of breaking point. And then she mostly kind of disappears from the story. And then the next time we see her, she's mostly back to normal. Whereas Ruby is someone who's already reached that breaking point and then goes from there and does some investigating and says, I'm going to do something about it, and teams up with the homeless disabled people. And, you know, they say, we're going to make a plan. But then they kind of run out of steam and have to tread water for a bit until the cliffhanger because they don't actually have anything to do. And I fully believe this is one story. This is the story of someone who realizes what's wrong, then does something about it. And then they don't have to spend a long time, you know, doing nothing about doing something about it because the cliffhanger comes along and the next episode, you know, sorts it out. But I think you give all of this to Ruby and it makes much more sense. Even at the start with baby Poppy, you know, you've got these two adults in Belinda's life who we've never seen before, who are basically stand-ins for Cherry and Carla Sunday, you know, and Poppy is a character that Ruby knows. She met her in Space Babies and they called the doctor Mummy and Daddy, the Space Babies, and the doctor said, oh, I wish we were your parents, but we're not. Wish. Parents, Ruby and the Doctor, husband and wife. There's no Belinda in this. There's no place for Belinda here. It's all Ruby's story, and it explains why Belinda, you know, has a few scenes of just the start of an arc and then is done with it in this one, because it's actually the starting point for Ruby that then ends up. It doesn't work, and it feels like it's so obvious why. But instead of it being half the clueless doctor who's having stuff happen to him at work, and he's a little bit more the one who's been brainwashed, and half the companion who's actually realising what's going on and doing something about it, you have a three-way split between the clueless doctor, the clueless Belinda, who's barely been in this season, and is spending her penultimate episode, you know, not knowing who she is, and not being who she is, and Ruby, who does know what's going on, but there's too much room in the runtime for her to actually do anything, so she has to say, yeah, we've got plans, we don't just sit around, let's go and hold an iPad up at a skyscraper for 20 minutes and achieve nothing. I think it just robs this episode of any momentum it could have had, because there's no one cutting through as a clear through line, and it's meandering. It's pointless meandering for so much of it. Obviously, there's been a little bit of speculation from me on why the episode is this way. But even if I'm wrong about why the episode is broken, the episode is broken, and it doesn't work, and I do not like it. I think maybe it's slightly better than The Legend of Ruby Sunday because but more things happen, or it's got a little bit more going on. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know, they both have that kind of time-wasting feel, you know, building to something. But at least it ends somewhere that promises that next week there'll be a little bit more action. And I'm sure it will be good, right? Reality War. Why is it called that? Never really given it literally any thought until now. I saw it at the cinema. I've never seen Doctor Who at the cinema before, so that was quite exciting, even if I didn't have hugely high hopes. I was very unwell when it aired. I thought I was getting better, but I was actually about to get much worse, so I just sat there in a kind of daze, just like, what's happening? And then I rewatched it to make this video and was like, oh no, okay, I was actually totally sane. Yeah, this is... let's get into it. This is just utter nonsense. I can't imagine being in any way invested or engaged or even following the plot as anything other than the drivel that they have to spout in between moments that may lead to a little character thing happening or a funny line happening. There's so much just standing around, a million people standing around in a room talking, which I think does allow for a little more of those kind of funny moments or character moments than if they were just running from point A to point B for the sake of nothing, like they did last year in whatever that finale was called. Big Dog finale. Sutek. Reality? No. Death? Empire? Yes. Empire of Death. Maybe it's better than that. Maybe it's not, because the stuff that is happening here is just total nonsense. We learn that the Wish World wasn't just a WandaVision, it was a Groundhog Day. They've been time looping us to break reality and get through to Omega, who they end up just kind of finding anyway, without having to do it another day. that feels like they changed their minds, right? From Wish World to Reality War, they were like, yeah, and it's also this, but we don't need this. All very strange. Again, no one's following this episode for this reason. But to be honest, it's not like it's offering a huge amount of the not this reason either. I said that it was good that there was that element of standing around talking. Most of it is awful. There was an insane number of flashbacks in this episode, just no trust whatsoever for its audience. The one instance of looking back in time that I did quite like was Anita going through all those doors and seeing the Doctor's past. Some fun, weird choices there, like the Wedding of River Song. Oh yeah, Anita is in this, hooray! But I feel like it's a bit strange how they treat her here. I think after a year of intense, real life-changing, loving friendship with the Doctor, she's kind of characterized here as like a crazy lady with a crush who's searching the galaxy for the Doctor. Then when she finds out he's interested in men, kind of goes, oh, I don't have a chance, and then, runs straight into the arms of the rebound guy and gets pregnant. And I don't know, I feel like they had more going on to them than just a crush. Like they spent every day for a year together. I'm sure that would have come up. And then for most of the episode, Anita is just a doorstop. She's just holding the door open, and there's just like 20-minute, 30-minute gaps where she says nothing, and then it just cuts over to her. And you're like, oh yeah, she's in this. So, yeah, the treatment of her feels very, very strange. That being said, she might be the best thing about the episode. Like, every line she has, I was like, oh, yeah, that's Anita. And to be honest, the cinema audience I saw it with, they went wild for seeing her and then for anything she said after that. So, clearly, that's the leftover Moffat magic that you just can't deny. Speaking of audience reactions and, like, the cheer-worthy moments, like the Flash entering the Speed Force, feels like there's a few moments here that are designed to have you going, whoa, yeah, epic, or like, be real fan crowd pleaser moments that don't feel great at all. Like Mel and the Rani reuniting does so little for me. I'm just like, great. It's not like Sarah Jane and the Daleks, Sarah Jane and Davros. It's nothing. And then we have the Doctor suiting up and jumping on the little ridiculous Count Dooku Segway speeder. That feels ridiculous. It falls flat as a moment. Everyone kind of suits up, all the unit employees, when they press the button that activates all their little, microchips that they've tagged all their employees with. It's like Shirley zooms off, Mel gets on her bike, everyone's like, we're going to work. It just feels really cringe. That's not a word I use as far as criticism goes, but cringe is the word. Speaking of that, like all the unit employees being microchipped by the state, I guess, is really interesting and fun. It's one of those things that it's like last year we had the very useful bio database that Roger Ap Gwilliam's fascist government imposed on people, and they were like, that's very handy. It just feels like there's just all these kind of accidental, like, oh yeah, really useful bit of fascism there. Yeah, great unit. Great people that the show has so much to say negatively about, I'm sure. Also, speaking of unit, there are just far too many people in that base. Like, it's the second finale in a row that we're just spending mostly in this unit office, and I want half these people to just go away. Like, who's Colonel Ibrahim? Like, Kate, again, is nothing. Maybe she's kind of fun, she's wearing tweed. I don't know. Just a useless inclusion, all of these people. Susan Twist, who I quite like. Susan Twist is now basically the scientific advisor, and Shirley's just here as like, hey guys, I'm around as well. I don't know, just any time spent with them in the group scenes just feels like we're diverting away from what might end up mattering and being good. And the nail in the coffin on all that is that moment of, sometimes I think we're all your children, and the Doctor looks round emotionally at Colonel Ibrahim, his son. Shirley, his daughter. It's awful, unearned, saccharine dreck, just pathetic bit of writing that, and just really, really funny though. So the Rani's big plan in this episode is to bring back Omega, or I don't know how they even say it in this episode. Omega, something like that. They bring him back, and for some reason he's now a dreadful. I don't know. To say that you're bringing back Omega is to do something quite exciting for fans. I mean, I think also by the time we knew he was coming back, we'd lost a bit of faith. But I still think it implies he's going to have some role as himself and not as a nonsense, nothing CGI beast. For the second year in a row that we've done this, by the way, a character that was a real physical presence in an episode with, something you could actually interact with. Sutek, Omega, and now it's just, they're both just beasts, mindless, basically, beasts that the Doctor has no choice but to, drag to death through the time vortex or to shoot into hell with a big gun. There's no kind of interplay that you get with two actors on the screen, there's nothing for Ncuti to bounce off. It's just, what is Russell T Davies doing here? Is it flexing the new VFX budget? Is it, I don't know, is it learning the wrong lesson from the Satan Pit? Is it like, people really like big CGI characters like that? I don't know. It's bizarre. Conrad and Mrs. Flood are barely in this episode. Maybe they were scared they might make the episode good. I mean, Mrs. Flood feels at times like she's just added on reshoots, like they've just green screened her in sometimes. And Conrad, he's got nothing to do. We see him at the very end. He's relevant to the Wish. Ruby thanks him for making the Wish world kind of nice. And I don't think she's lying to him. She's trying to outsmart him and get to him and take him down. But I don't think she's necessarily not being truthful there. She says, your Wish world could have been worse. It could have been a lot more hateful, a lot more evil. But he says, I did what the Doctor said. I gave everyone a home. I kept everyone safe. And I think you're meant to buy into that. And she then uses that to appeal to his humanity, about his father, and then he gets a happy ending. So when I said that it's maybe a bit strange to say, thank you for making your world nice, and then in the very same episode say, there was no place in the world for the trans character, Rose Noble. That feels very strange, and people were like, no, she was just lying to Conrad, she was just manipulating him. I don't think that's true. I think they do think Conrad's done a bit of kindness there, and for that he's owed a kind of memory wipe, happy ending, reset resolution. So I think it's really strange optically to say, yes, traditional conservative trad values, which, was that ever Conrad's real thing? Was that ever what he was about in Lucky Day? I don't know. So like traditional conservative values, no trans people at all, homeless, disabled people because they don't fit in society, but thank you for not making your world mean. I think that's strange. And I think, you can tell me that Ruby was lying, but I don't believe you. But the villain side of the story, the Rani, Omega, Conrad, Mrs. Flood, it wraps itself up because that's not what this episode is about. It turns out it's actually about a baby. It's about baby Poppy. And on paper, I'm like, okay, great. Get rid of the plotty stuff and deal with the character drama. That's cool. Leave half an hour to really deal with the implications of human stories. On paper, I'm on board with that. But I don't think this human story, this character drama is worth sacrificing the rest of the episode for, because it's not very good. Because it's all about baby Poppy for some reason, and it really does feel like it's for some reason. The Poppy of it all feels so random. Anita at the start says like, oh, your baby's not real though, Doctor, right? It's all part of the wish. And he's like, how dare you? Like, he instantly goes into intense, dramatic, I am the Doctor, I've lived for 2 billion years and seen galaxies explode, and that girl is more important than anything in the world. And it's like, one, I don't believe that he would feel this way, and two, I don't believe that he does feel this way. It feels like he's just kind of listing why she's important. It's badly written, badly delivered, just a really rubbish moment that kind of reflects a general what are we doing here vibe towards the Poppy storyline. They say maybe she's important because she's a Time Lord baby and there's no such thing these days, and people think, oh wait, are they going to canonize looms? Are they going to say that Gallifreyans can't have babies, they're made like that, etc.? But no, it just turns out that they've retconned it so that the Master destroying Gallifrey and the Time Lords also sterilizes all the existing Time Lords. It's all very strange. Very strange. But if that's the reason why she's important, and they tell us that's one of the reasons, by the end of the episode she's human, and that's fine too. So, I hope that was worth all that for. I don't know. the episode's emotional climax kind of hinges on her vanishing from existence. And I mean, I hate to say it, I didn't care. Did you care? I didn't care. She's a baby. She's cute, but she's not a character we connect to, and she's not a character that we've had time to connect to. As far as the episode goes, she's basically a prop, and that's harsh and mean, but like, I don't know. We're meant to buy into this as this huge tragedy that, you know, something awful has happened. You know, she's a lot of the stakes of the episode as well. But once she vanishes, it's like, okay, this is worth sacrificing everything for. This is a baby's life. And I don't know. Am I heartless? I didn't care. And having her be Poppy from Space Babies really just confuses everything. Because if you're hinging this tragedy on the fact that there's this life that used to exist as part of the Wish and now no longer does, it's like, well, yeah, but it's Poppy, right? It's Poppy from Space Babies, Season 1, Episode 1. She's still out there. You know, it's not like she's been taken from Space Babies and deleted. There's just another one, and then it goes back to there just being the one. Is that awful? Is that a horrible tragedy? It's a really confusing element that I don't really understand the relevance of, and just kind of muddles it further. It's already pretty muddled. I will say, in amongst absolute dreck and nothingness and confusion, the bit where Belinda and the Doctor are passing the coat back and forth and it's being folded and getting smaller and Ruby's just watching it is great. It's a really cool moment. It's a really impactful moment in amongst stuff that we do not care about. And for some reason, they managed just that great bit of, you know, it's not genius, but it's great and it is good. And you actually feel that, oh my God, you know, they don't realize it, but she is literally being written out of existence. But that's the only moment I feel anything, really. And Millie Gibson, God bless her, she's doing her absolute best to salvage this. And she comes pretty close at times to selling the reality of this. Like, she knows that Poppy should be there. And she's kind of telling them, she's a really great actor, and sometimes the show forgets to remind you that. Like, she really does sell that moment, and but then I think what could be good, she's telling them what's happening, and they're so slow to listen to her. They're so quick to dismiss it as nonsense. Like, the whole world has just been rewritten, and you've got Ruby, who was one of the ones to help rewrite the world because she remembered the previous world, is going, guys, there used to be a baby called Poppy. And like, the Doctor's like, no, there wasn't. And Belinda's like, look, I don't want to be rude, but it's quite offensive that you'd say that. And it makes both of them come across as really horrible and stupid, because like, of course this is a possibility that as everyone's minds was being, you know, rewritten and everything, that someone slipped through the cracks. And it's really strange that, you know, that's the angle they take with it, that they take so long to, it just feels like padding, it feels like extra conflict for no reason, and it just makes everyone come across as really strange except Ruby. And then, you know, despite Ruby being this kind of inciting thing, she's the character that makes them fix the world and get Poppy back. Supposedly that's what we want, right? To get Poppy back. And we've got Ruby to thank for that. Despite Ruby being that and being the companion of this era, you know, she's across both seasons. She's basically got as much screen time as Ncuti. After the Doctor flies off and saves Poppy, we don't see Ruby again. She doesn't get a thank you. She doesn't get a goodbye. She doesn't get any kind of acknowledgement in the end of this era. Sorry. It's bizarre. But maybe no ending at all is better than what we gave Belinda, which was the worst ending possible. This is Belinda's worst episode, and that is saying something. I think those big group scenes, which is most of the episode, where it's just all of them stood in a room talking, because there's so many of them, they all get such little play, which means they all kind of have to be boiled down into one particular trait or aspect. And Belinda gets, this is my daughter, I will keep my daughter safe, no one touches my daughter, I'm here to save my daughter, which is fair enough if you've got a daughter, but she never used to have a daughter. She used to have a personality, and now she's pure mother. That's all she's offering in this episode. And then she says to the Doctor, I can't be part of this big climactic fight. I need to go down and save my daughter and be in the box for the climax of this whole villain storyline that supposedly features my next door neighbour, Mrs. Flood, but that doesn't really matter. It's like, yeah, shut me in a box. I can't be in the story. I'm a mother now. All the stuff we knew about Belinda going into this episode is basically gone. You know, they even tie in her series-long arc. Her destiny is to meet the Doctor so that they can bring Poppy into the world, which, again, they didn't do. Poppy is from space babies. Why does the Doctor have to kill himself and rewrite reality so that Poppy from Space Babies is the daughter of one of our companions? What's going on here? Can someone make that make sense for me? Because the episode surely isn't. I think it's still a bad episode and a bad ending if you cut out Belinda and kind of give all this to Ruby, but I do think it makes a little bit more sense, like, for Ruby to end up with a baby. Like, babies is more her thing. Like, she was a baby. We saw Baby Ruby, we saw Lulu Bell, foster babies, space babies. She's the baby-themed one. So, like, giving her the baby to look after at the end, her and Carl or whatever, that would kind of make sense. Like, oh, you know, if this baby had totally been deleted out of the world, you know, she even brings up, like, I fell out of the world once and you brought me back. To kind of have her take care of Poppy in this way, it would at least flow a little better, even if you're saddling a 19-year-old companion with a baby. If someone has to be saddled with a baby, neither of it works. Whichever way you do it, it doesn't work. But it kind of feels like it's more in line with Ruby's storyline. Because for Belinda, it feels like the only reason she had this baby is because she was part of Conrad's, you know, conservative traditional world where, you know, men and women are married and they have babies. You know, she can't just be a single woman out in the world being a nurse. And it kind of feels like now she's stuck with a baby because they decided, well, yes, I know Conrad's world gave you that baby, but now you have to keep it and you have to raise it, and that has to be all you are. Some people think that the Belinda we've spent this whole season with has always had a daughter, and that's the implication, and that, like, the flashbacks we get to what she says about needing to get home, like, she was also just, like, saying, oh, and also I have a daughter, whenever we weren't looking. I don't think that's the implication. I feel like, you know, the Doctor shifting reality and he kind of brings those flashbacks into existence. He kind of rewrites Belinda. I think that's what's happening, because he's like, yeah, and who's the father again? Because, like, the whole point was that it was her and her and the Doctor, and now it's just her and Ricardo. I don't know. I don't think the implication is that she's always had this child. I think the implication is that that's what she becomes. I don't think the Belinda we saw in Robot Revolution was a single mother. I think Belinda got her entire reality rewritten for the sake of this ending. I think not just like her personality, but like I think her existence got changed. I think you can't convince me that Robot Revolution Belinda was this mother that they imply her to be by the end. I think the Doctor has changed that, and that the version we knew was dead now. Like, she doesn't exist anymore. It's like Back to the Future, when Marty arrives back home in 1985, but things are different. You know, his parents love each other, they have a bit more money. It would be like if Marty saw that, and we as an audience are reacting to it being different, but Marty goes, ah yes, my parents love each other and we have lots of money, just as I remember. And it's like, okay, what happened to our Marty that would recognise this as a change? Or like X-Men, Days of Future Past, Logan wakes up and he goes, oh, can't wait to do another day of teaching here at the school I've taught at for the last 15 years. It's like, you need the character to wake up and go, well, what's happened? What, things are different, you know, and they react to the difference, and it might be a positive difference. In those two movies, it is a positive difference, but without our protagonist reacting to it, the implication is that they're gone. You know, it's that the version we've been spending our time with no longer exists, and we're left with a new Belinda, a new Marty, a new Logan. It's really strange, and there's a reason things tend to happen in a certain way, and it's very odd that it hasn't gone this way for this episode. And if they didn't want us thinking like this, then they shouldn't have had her in her final scene go, why does it feel like there's something I've forgotten? Because if the implication is that she's back to normal and how things should be, and she's got her baby back, then there's nothing she's forgotten. What she has forgotten, because that's not true, is she's forgotten who she was. She's forgotten her real self, her original Belinda self, and that's devastating. I really do think, like, our Belinda is gone. You know, her goodbye with the Doctor is so strange because this kind of smiley, motherly Belinda doesn't really feel like the one we've been spending time with. And there's this kind of thing of like, maybe we'll meet again. But it doesn't feel like it holds much meaning because it doesn't feel like there's much of our Belinda left. It doesn't feel like it's the one we've spent our time with. They've just met this new parallel Belinda that maybe will come along on another adventure. And that's supposed to be the happy ending for the character. It doesn't work. I do not like it. The character assassination of Belinda Chandra was my main takeaway of the episode, but I suppose I should also talk about the Doctor. I wish I could say that Belinda was done dirty so that the Doctor could thrive, but this is a weak episode for him as well, man. There's this moment that they clearly expect to be this big Doctor-defining kind of major moment of the Doctor shedding his, traditional, conservative suit outfit for that he has in the Wish world and wearing a proper Doctor costume and declaring, "I am the Doctor and I'm rejecting this world that you've put me in." And it's very empowering and it's very strong and it's a very, he's wearing a skirt rather than the suit and trousers, and it's proper, a proper moment of triumph. But the thing is, I don't know, the Doctor doesn't have a consistent costume. It's not like he's suiting up into his Doctor look, for starters. But also, it kind of implies that the suit that Conrad's world had him wearing was kind of restrictive and kind of went against the gender expression that he wanted to go for. The Doctor wears a suit all the time. He wears a blue suit, like in this season, last season, he wears a very similar suit to the one that's this supposed kind of, that's not who I am. In Devil's Cord, in Lux, it's just really funny that they're kind of implying that, this is the Doctor taking back his identity, when what he was wearing before was kind of very similar to his real identity. This is his final episode. What else have we got as his big kind of Doctor moments in this episode to kind of properly see him off as the character? A few moments of flying from 0 to 100 as far as intensity and shouting about Poppy. There's a bit where he's talking to the Rani and he's doing a kind of cool, intense kind of look, and then next time it cuts to him, it's like, "And I'm now shouting," and it's embarrassing. He flies on the Segway and that just looks silly. Shooting, the big CGI skeleton with a big laser doesn't feel clever or triumphant or, exciting. He maybe outsmarts him because they said the Vindicator was powerful enough to, do a big explosion, but, turning that into a massive gun, I love the bits in Doctor Who where the Doctor uses his massive gun to defeat the enemy. I don't know. None of that feels particularly good. There's a moment where the Doctor steps out onto the unit helipad, and it just reminded me of how great things felt in The Giggle when he appeared and he was just this electric, just incredible presence, just something quite unlike anything we'd felt before in the show from the main character. And it just felt like there was so much potential and he was going to take the show so far and be so, incredible and, just define the role for a generation. And he just kind of hasn't. And that's not to say he's never been good or he hasn't had really strong episodes and strong moments. But the overall here is a really disappointing Doctor, I think, not because he's not good. As I said, I've always said that, in the moment-to-moment line deliveries and stuff, he's an interesting presence. He's a compelling character to watch. But I think he's fallen flat on so many of the bigger moments, and just he's not been consistently written in a certain way at all. I think Moffat did the best job in Joy to the World, but that never kind of led to a consistent characterization that was strong and that worked. I don't know. He feels like those memes, the Potential Man memes of as soon as he gets a proper consistent characterization, as soon as they give him a few good stories, he's going to do great justice to the role any day now. And that those days never come. It feels like we barely know him. It feels like he's still this new Doctor who's settling in and we're getting used to him and he's getting used to the role and sometimes he's really great and sometimes he's, still finding his feet, but we'll get there eventually, but it's over, and I think, time-wise, it's not been a huge amount of time, but episode-wise, he has had enough episodes to make more of an impact than he has, frankly. And I think of all the new Who Doctors, this is the first one that has felt like he's instantly gone to the mid-tier. Usually recency bias should catapult you into the top, and you're like, wow, this is the Doctor, he's the Doctor, he might be one of the best Doctors, wow. And then you kind of assess it over time. You're like, all right, maybe Matt Smith, maybe David Tennant, maybe they're not top three. Capaldi obviously is top three, but maybe I was hyped at the time being in that era. Ncuti's era has happened, we're in it basically still, there's nothing to replace it, and I'm still feeling he's kind of one of the middle ones. And that's fine, someone has to be, but it's just a sad way to be, especially when he started so strong. And another point in, the fact he's the current Doctor and that should bring with it a bit more weight, I felt absolutely nothing when he left, when he changed. And maybe that comes down to why he changed, because, he says, we're going to need to bring Poppy back, shift the universe 1 axis, 1 degree out of sync or whatever. And there's only one thing power enough to do that, the last of the Time Lords. And it feels like he's about to have a big triumphant moment. And then he says, for my next trick, I'm going to kill myself. And it's this kind of, that's not smart, that's not exciting, really. It's and the fact it seems to come out of nowhere. There was a shocked groan gasp that went out across the cinema when he goes, oh, and I really like this face, because it seems to come from nowhere. It's, the story's kind of getting going, we need to save the day. Okay, now I'm going to, regenerate and say goodbye to this face. This face that it feels like we barely knew. It feels like one of the most arbitrary reasons for a Doctor to regenerate that we've had in the whole series. It feels like it really does come from nowhere. And it's because maybe they didn't announce it ahead of time. They wanted a surprise regeneration for the first time. So maybe within the episode it feels a little bit more jarring. But I think even if we did know, and frankly I did know, it was fairly clear he was gone, I think, from the fact they weren't saying he wasn't. But a lot of people clearly didn't know, but I think it still just feels like it's just, right, here's the point in the episode where I change. So very odd. And then Jodie Whittaker shows up, my least favourite Doctor. Someone who I think, instead of going to the top or the mid-tier of the Doctor tier list, fell right to the bottom and stayed there. She shows up, and she's great. It's a wonderful scene, and she's brilliant in it, and the characterization is really strong, and it feels like, in amongst everything that's happened, oh good, a grown-up's shown up. We've got a real character here, a real, an authoritative figure to show up and guide us through whatever this episode is doing. And that's such a bizarre feeling. It feels like, I don't know, she never had that authority in her own era. But now here she is, and it's a scene of just 2 characters talking, and for the most part it's not about nonsense, it's about guiding you through the change, and it's suddenly a good Doctor Who scene, and both Doctors are really good in it, and they're good actors bouncing off each other, and it's bizarre. I really, really like it. And it was a great surprise in the cinema, and people lost their minds. And it's so funny that in amongst one of, the most ridiculous, stupid episodes we've had, there's suddenly this moment between 2 characters that I felt weren't great, ending up, having a really good moment together. Just really funny, and I really like how the Doctor's characterised. And people, I tweeted about how I really enjoyed that scene, and people got really sad and grumpy and saying things like, wow, why are they saying that, she was good here? She was literally like this for her whole era. Why are you saying it's good now? And it's like, okay, if that was true, we would have felt it about that. Okay, this is a sidetrack. You could tell those people were really wanting to call you sexist. Like, oh, now when a man takes over the show, you like it. But then they realised that Chibnall had written the show before. So it's like, oh, so when a different man, it's okay. Trying to moralise it. But for some reason, Russell has put a bit more Doctor juice into 13 than Chibnall ever managed. And it works, frankly. Then the 13th Doctor leaves, and we're back to the regularly scheduled nonsense. If you've noticed, I've said nonsense quite a lot this video. It's because I'm no longer allowed to swear. But yeah, the Doctor, he says some stuff, some drivel. He says, joy to the world. Yeah, he ties it in to the star, to joy from Joy to the World. I quite like Joy to the World, and I don't care about joy. I don't care about the star. I don't care about all that. And to tie that into the Doctor's last moments is really strange, and it kind of assumes a reception to that episode and a love for that character that doesn't exist. And given that this whole regeneration was a reshoot they did in February, kind of weird that, we knew what the reception to Joy to the World was. It wasn't that they were preempting it. They weren't going, right, people are going to love the Christmas special, and they banked on that wrong. They knew that people didn't really care for Joy, and they ploughed ahead with that being the ending anyway. And he says that's his last words, isn't it? And it has been a real joy, that kind of thing. So having that been a big part, I felt nothing. I really did feel so little when he regenerated. Just kind of frustrated that it was happening and that it was happening this way, and that we were kind of saying goodbye to a character that hadn't really found his footing yet. And then Billie Piper shows up. Is she the Doctor? Is she the Doctor? We don't know. They say in the credits, and introducing Billie Piper, but they don't say as the Doctor. The magazine, the Doctor Who magazine cover that always has the new actor and the introducing as the Doctor, just said, as the Doctor? ? So they're trying to turn this into a tease, into a mystery. Frankly, they don't know the answer yet. They won't figure it out until they have to actually tell that story. So the idea of us speculating about it is totally inconsequential. It's one of those mysteries that is just frustrating and tedious, and it's, in a real transition period for the show to kind of play silly games with this and go, oh, is she the Doctor? Isn't she? Do we even have a Doctor? We've just said goodbye to Ncuti prematurely for production reasons rather than story reasons. But now we're going to play a little game with you about whether Billie Piper's the new one. I've got no time for it, frankly, and I don't think the fan base does either. I think they... I've seen not any real kind of fun speculation there. It all feels just a little bit... With every new detail, it's just more eye-rolling, more sighing, and more kind of, it's desperate, frankly, to bring her back. It's this kind of... They did David Tennant, 3 years ago, and now they've just done Billie Piper. It's kind of hitting, snake eating its tail kind of thing, way quicker than a kind of reboot of the show like this should do. To start with David Tennant, do 2 seasons, barely 2 years, 18 months of Ncuti as the Doctor, and then go, Billie Piper now, I guess. I don't know, it speaks to a real dire situation at Doctor Who HQ, I'll tell you that. And yeah, I said it was reshot. We know that Ncuti wasn't originally going to leave in this story. We don't think the regeneration, you can tell in the behind-the-scenes footage or something, it was done earlier this year instead of with the rest of the Season 2 production. The specifics of why he left and why that, I don't care at the moment to speculate, because we'll get more information at some point. But this wasn't originally the plan. They're going to lie and say it always was, but here's where we learn that believing them on everything they say regarding production changes and the plan all along isn't worth listening to. So maybe when you're getting cross with me for saying that plans change with Ruby, and you say, here's RTD literally saying you're wrong, I don't care what RTD says. He's a liar, and I'm not. That got a little... I thought I was bringing some of myself to that. I need to step back a bit. Didn't realise that whole fiasco got to be quite so much. I don't know. I don't care about why. What we just have to deal with is that this is how the episode ended. But we kind of have an idea of how it might have ended. There is these rumours. We have got some information that there was this alternate ending of Reality War. There's this promo image that leaked through Disney Plus or something of Belinda and the Doctor in a club. And it's like, how would that have fit into anything if it wasn't just the original ending? And the rumour is that the episode would have ended with happy resolution, everything's back to normal, we think. They're all dancing. I don't know if Poppy is Belinda's daughter. I don't know what happens in that part of the story. But they're dancing and having fun, and it's like, yeah, we might be coming back. We might be doing a Season 3 with this TARDIS team. I don't know what I'm doing this because they're dancing. And then it pans up to the top of the club, and watching them is Susan Foreman, and she's holding baby Poppy, and she says, come on, Mum, let's go. And it's like, what? Poppy is Susan's mum? What? That would explain everything, because she's the Doctor's daughter, and now her daughter is Susan. It is just a rumour. I believe it, because it kind of makes everything make sense. It explains Susan's involvement across both seasons. Like, they bring her up way more than they ever have. They tease her coming back. She started to come back in flashbacks and little messages to the Doctor. She's also wearing this Bail Organa looking thing in Doctor Who Unleashed, and it's not a costume she wore in anything we saw, nor is it something that I think Carol Ann Ford would just wear in her time off. I might be wrong, but, the Doctor had that whole nonsense thing of like, no, I'm not a father yet. I do have a granddaughter, but I've never had kids. Yes, it's all wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Maybe I will have kids one day. And now had a daughter, and then to me, that explains everything. It's still really stupid, but it does explain everything, and it would flow a lot better across the series. What we have instead is stupid, but also doesn't flow. It's baffling, confusing stupidity compared to lazy fan service kind of stupidity. And it would explain Poppy's importance. It would. I fully believe that this is how things were going to end, and I think it's very interesting that they walked that back in order to do away with the Doctor, if that's what they did and why they did it. Because as it stands, what's Susan doing in this story? Why does she appear a little bit and then not? Why is Poppy the Doctor's daughter and then not? Interesting stuff. Easy to look at and say that would be better. If we had it, we probably would have been hating it. So there's no version of Reality War that's good by the sounds of it, because they filmed two, and neither were any good. I don't know, guys. I think it's interesting that was a kind of traditional open-ended finale ending. You know, it was kind of a promise of more of the same. You know, a specific tease for the future, the Doctor and companion still being around. It's kind of like we'll do season 3. Whereas what we have is a more kind of, I don't know, change. It's a change of status quo ending that they can pick up on or not, I guess. I've never known quite if the show was going to end how it should end. I kind of thought with like that kind of survival, walk into the sunset, fade to black kind of thing. That kind of makes me sad, because it's like, oh, there's no real promise of more. They just say that, you know, there will be more out there. I've always thought you should promise something. So in a way, that Billie Piper twist is that. But then I hate that, so maybe I've always been wrong. I've always thought like Power of the Doctor ending on an open-ended regeneration would have been awful and maybe killed the show, but maybe that is the best thing for it. Not killing the show, but like leaving it open, because now whoever takes over, if Russell continues or not, they've got to deal with whatever's going on with Billie Piper, and that doesn't feel like a particularly enviable position. So as far as endings go, what we have is kind of what I would have always thought we needed, but obviously a dreadful version of that, the worst possible version of that kind of makes me feel stupid for ever thinking that this was the way forward. So yeah, it's a bad ending of a bad episode that may very well be the worst episode. And whenever you throw that around, people say, oh no, don't be so hyperbolic. But genuinely, what works here? What in this episode is actually successful? The folding of the coat. Anita has a couple of funny lines. That's it. It's like 68 minutes long. It's just nothing but drivel and dreck, and it destroys the characters and wastes the characters and just is filled with just stupid, eye-rolling, just mind-numbingly dull, obvious, boring. It's as bad as the show gets. It's embarrassing to watch, genuinely embarrassing to kind of see the things that they think might make this a good episode. It feels like, as you watch it, it's hard to imagine that the show was once good, let alone in this season was once good, was once acceptable to put on screen. It is... Yeah, I am struggling to think of an episode that fails this spectacularly at doing so many things. And it's probably let down by the fact it is doing so many things. Like, it fails a companion, it fails a companion arc, it fails the regeneration, it fails the Rani, Omega. But it's, that's not an excuse. That's what the episode's doing. So pointing at all those things it's doing badly is the episode's fault for doing so many things and not getting a single one of them right. I hate this episode. I don't tend to hate when it comes to this show. I tend to hate Star Wars. Star Wars is something that manages to bring passion out of me on that level. Doctor Who, I either enjoy myself, really enjoy myself, or get kind of frustrated, eye roll. Isn't that Doctor Who? Whereas something about this episode drives me insane, and I'm so annoyed that this is what the show has come to so quickly after what seemed like quite a hopeful reboot. Quite a kind of interesting, fresh start for the show and the characters, and dreadful. This really is dreadful. So I guess that's the Reality War. Now let's talk about the season as a whole. It's just not great, is it, season 2? I see some people say that, it was, and it just ended really badly, and that everyone switched up on it after the finale. And frankly, I think you're allowed to do that, by the way. I think a 2-part finale of an 8-part season being bad is enough to colour your feelings on the season. It's not like you just got a bad memory or something. I think that makes up a really decent portion of the overall experience. And it's such an important 2-episode finale. It hinges everything on that, and so much happens that, of course you can say that it was good, but then the finale ruined it. I think, a finale that bad is enough to ruin any season, full length, like 13 episode season, let alone one that is so short. But also, I disagree with that as a premise, that it was a great season up to that point. Was the start even that strong? I was fairly positive, about the first 3 episodes. I kind of thought, look, this is a good start. But it was kind of conditional positivity. It was, this is good, provided it gets better. Provided this is a kind of rocky start for a great season. This isn't enough to ruin the season. That's what starts are like, really. They're kind of hopeful. Robot Revolution, I think, is messy, but I think it also does a really great job of selling us on Belinda and the idea of her as a companion, and the general story of the season being getting her home and this kind of reluctant companion that's fun, but is also pushing back against the Doctor. While I thought that was a messy start, but fairly promising for Belinda. At least it gave us a good companion there, and she's going to be great for the rest of the season. That ended up being the good old days that we look back on when it comes to Belinda. It ends up being the high point from which she fell for the rest of the season, which you don't want Robot Revolution as a high point, really. Lux, as far as I'm concerned, is the only episode this season that's an uncontested, unambiguous high point. A kind of banger episode of great Doctor Who, that kind of sets the bar really high and then is never even slightly met by any other episode that followed. To the point where, when you're watching The Reality War, the idea that Lux was in the same season, in the same year, in the same era, is baffling. It's hard to imagine that the show could have been that good so recently, because it has fallen so far. Everything else, I don't know, what have we got? The Well and the Story Engine are kind of similar tiers of showing a lot of promise but not living up to it, doing a lot of stuff that I really like, but kind of failing to come out of it as anything other than fine. Lucky Day and Interstellar Song Contest are also similar episodes. They're doing a lot of good stuff, but failing to pull it together into anything that isn't gross and abysmal as far as the big picture goes. And then it's the finale. Then it's the lowest of the low. Then it's as bad as the show gets. So the idea that this is a great season that was let down by the ending, I can't see that at all. And I know, obviously, people have different experiences. I think a lot of people are more positive on The Well and the Story Engine than I am. Or they must be, if this is how they're averaging out the whole season. But, I think it's, fine, great, fine, bad, fine, bad, worse, worst. Not a great average, really. And I genuinely have to wonder if Belinda is the worst companion that we've had since the revival in 2005. I think she really might have an uncontestedly bad trajectory as far as being a companion goes, and the treatment within the series goes. She starts out great, really unambiguously fantastic in Robot Revolution. And then Lux, which I think is a fantastic episode, even by Lux, she's kind of starting to have those edges sanded down. By The Well, there's very little of that kind of personality that we actually kind of fell in love with. She's not really in Lucky Day. She's barely kind of in the Story Engine. She's kind of in and out of it, like a Belinda light, but not quite. And then she's unrecognisable, written by someone who doesn't know who Belinda is, in episode 6. And then she's mind-washed in episode 7. And, again, unrecognisable for story reasons in episode 8. That's got to be some kind of record. That's one good episode. That's one strong, and I think maybe she rises above the Chibnall lot just by being performed by someone that brings a bit of spark of life, like a real actor who can bring some actual charm and personality and magic to the role, even when the scripts are failing her. But I don't think it's enough. I really don't think it's enough. And I think I might be judging her on a different standard because I see how much potential she has, and then she falls so short of that, rather than the Chibnall companions, which I know are nothing and stay nothing. But it's got to be close. It's such a devastating trajectory. It's such a depressing reality for one of the best performers we've had as a companion, one of the most likable, beautiful actors we've had in the role. And this is what we have for her, is one of the worst seasons and one of the worst companion stories. I also think for a season to be considered good or great or, let down in a few places but good overall, it kind of has to be about something. It has to be telling a story beyond just individual episodes. Like, the quality of a season, for me, is determined on more than just the average number of good episodes compared to bad. I don't know, this season's not really about anything. The marketing was about something. The marketing promised a really strong hook for the season, the bring her home hook, the get Belinda, this reluctant companion, back against all odds, against, whatever's keeping her away from home. But that's not what this is. That's never what this is, really, beyond the first episode. It's just a kind of higgledy-piggledy scattered kind of thing of ideas, none of them good, frankly. We get into Rani and Omega and all kinds of characters and storylines and arcs, and it's about Poppy the baby, and it's about, the Doctor killing himself, and Billie Piper's here. I don't feel like I've come away with this with any kind of takeaway as far as what the season is about. Because there isn't anything to take away, really. So no, I don't see this season as some sort of kind of misunderstood brilliance. I don't even see the season, like last year, as like an overall mess with some hidden gold in the middle. That had such a great run in the middle. This has nothing like that. It's much, much worse than last season. And it really felt like it might be better. I see very little merit in this season at all. Like, on the micro level, on the macro, the big picture, I just don't feel like it's doing anything of value at all. And yeah, I think it's instantly fallen right to the bottom of my series ranking. Usually my series ranking excludes the Chibnall era. Like, it's like, here's the real stuff and here's the stuff that was all so bad. But genuinely, this might break into the Chibnall era. I don't really know where that all sits, but it's the first of these kind of newer seasons where you've had to consider the quality of the Chibnall era, because it might be on par with or below some of those seasons, which is outrageous. But this season was just really, really bad. I really didn't like it, but it's kind of I tend to steer clear of that kind of pure, I'll usually say, I had fun with it, I found things to like, whereas this is, man, this is bad. This is, about as bad as it gets as far as seasons go. And I might be harsher than the general consensus, I can't tell. I think a lot of people that would be on this level of anger and kind of, disappointment have lost so much interest that they're not even talking about the show. So that's why I might sound a little more, hyperbolic than the general consensus, is because a lot of the people that agree with me just aren't saying anything anymore because they don't care. And frankly, that's kind of similar to how I feel. I'm just making a video because that's what I do. But man, Lux was really good, wasn't it? It's so frustrating that Russell T Davies wrote that. He's capable of writing just a good, solid, classic episode of Doctor Who. Like, Wild Blue Yonder was like 2 years ago. It should not feel like the show has fallen so far that we're incapable of getting, anything of quality, when the guy running the show can still put out a 10 out of 10 banger. And not that Lux is necessarily a 10 out of 10, but it would be easier to swallow if Russell T Davies had lost all of his talent, if he had clearly just gone mad, like if he'd clearly just totally lost whatever spark he had. But the fact he's kind of got it, but we still mostly get absolute garbage, is a much stranger thing to have to deal with. It feels pretty surreal that the man a lot of us put our faith in to kind of save the show, or at least revitalise it, get it back going, that might have been the man to kill the show for good, and that is being kind of hyperbolic, and it's making an assumption that Disney won't come along tomorrow and renew the show. But it feels like that idea has been and gone. The BBC have said, "Oh, don't worry, it's not going anywhere, even without even without Disney. We're going to keep the show alive." I don't know that they can. It feels like they kind of might need some sort of external party. So it feels like, I don't know. Even if the show comes back, and it probably will, this version of the show that we've been watching feels like it's over. I think even when something else does come along, it won't be for a little while. I think the show takes quite a long time to make these days, and we've not really even started. There's not even really a doctor. We don't know what the show will look like if and when it does come back. So I think we're probably not likely to see anything next year. It's more than possible that we don't see anything the year after. So we could even be looking at a 2027, 2028 relaunch of the show. At this point, we just don't know. So it feels like, no matter what happens, it's over for now. But I think, to be honest, even before it had been months without hearing anything, it felt kind of over. It felt over by the time we were watching the back end of this season. It felt like whatever we were watching couldn't continue. And the show being cancelled is this kind of horror story among Doctor Who fans. It's kind of at the forefront of our minds at all times. It's the reason people obsess over ratings. It's like, oh no, it's dropping. The BBC are going to cancel it. We're going to lose it. This show's meant to go on forever. We're meant to be showing our grandkids the adventures of the 34th Doctor. It's this story that's supposed to keep going and keep evolving and keep moving. And, it's always... It's a show, as a fandom, we are so obsessed with this idea that we have to keep the show alive, we have to keep it going because it's gone before, and we can kind of all too easily picture a version of reality where we don't get the show. So I think it's kind of treated as this kind of worst case scenario, no Doctor Who. But I think worst case scenario is slightly different, and it's what we're experiencing now. And it's not that the show is cancelled; it's that the show is cancelled, and myself and a lot of other people are going, yeah, fair enough. It's meant to be this, this horrible thing, this like, oh no, the show, we want it to keep alive. But to look at what the show is currently doing or what it was doing this year and go, yeah, you know what, maybe no show is better than this. Maybe getting rid of it is the right call. And I think that's ridiculous. I think that's... not a point I could ever have seen myself being. Even throughout the Chibnall era, I was kind of thinking to myself that having a show was better than none at all. And maybe that's true. The last few years, had the show gone away and not been brought back by Russell T Davies, we've got episodes like Wild Blue Yonder, like I Love 73 Yards, Dot and Bubble, Lux, things like that. And it's like, it's not fair to say that Russell T Davies killed the show, because it was going to die after Power of the Doctor. No one was going to bring that back until he did. So he kind of kept the show on life support. And if, in those years, of him delaying the inevitable, we got some good episodes out of it, then maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it was all worthwhile, But, we've got episodes now that we wouldn't have had this not occurred. But at the same time, I do wonder whether the show is in a worse place for having had this reboot. This was kind of the big relaunch. This was the thing that brings the show back and into the mainstream, either for the first time in a while or for the first time ever. It was Disney money. It was Disney global streaming distribution. It was this push to have the show be more than it ever was, and this kind of Hooniverse idea of rivaling things like Star Wars and Marvel and all these things. And it's kind of amounted to nothing. It's had 2 seasons and kind of gone out with the exact opposite of a bang. And I don't know, I think it's interesting to me to think of what a third party looking at this might think. This was... They brought back David Tennant. They brought back the guy that famously made the show work. They really gave it a bit of an injection of money and advertising and all this, and it sank like a stone. Why, as Amazon or HBO, would I invest in a show that even when everything is going right for it, kind of as far as the on-paper attributes, it can't succeed? And it doesn't feel like the brand is in a great spot, really. as a result of this. I think if not this as a reboot, then what? There is the question of, well, maybe the show should have just been good and then it would still be going on. And I think that's possible. I think, you maybe get the good word of mouth, a good buzz from 2 unambiguously fantastic seasons, especially that first season. If it had just come out with such an incredible bang and made such a noise that, there's no choice but to keep this going and, squeeze as much out of it as you can. And I think that's very possible that, it starts incredibly. What we do have is a hard thing to recommend. If they're starting this as season 1 and you want to go, you've never been watching Doctor Who before, you've never been a fan of this, you can hop on here, you're going to have a great time, it's such a great show. It's kind of what you have to recommend is like, I don't know, it's Doctor Who still, it's kind of got high highs but embarrassingly low and fairly persistent lows. I think, that first season, it's like, well, you push past Space Babies, Devil's Cord, they're not great episodes, but there's some good stuff in the middle, and then you have a really awful finale. So yeah, I think on that level, that can't have done the show any favors, really, being something that's hard to recommend, hard to stick with if you're not, a fan of the show. I don't think it did a lot to win over new viewers, really. So I think on that level, yes, the show should have been better, and maybe it would have been, still around. But I think potentially just the state of the TV industry in the UK, the state of streaming as a concept, like globally across all the companies, there's no more money in it. Like Disney, they poured so much into it and they're realizing there's no money to be made out of it, so everything's drying up. You get Star Wars shows like Andor, that's never going to happen again, and they're kind of moving things like The Mandalorian onto the big screen because that's where you can actually make some money. So I think just the media landscape is changing in a way that maybe this was always going to happen. Maybe it gets 2 seasons on Disney, and then Disney's priorities change, and the BBC's priorities change, and the show goes away no matter what. I will say, though, maybe it would have been nice for it to have been cut short and us to feel sad about that. If we'd had 2 great seasons and then it was cancelled anyway, it would have felt really tragic and really sad, but I think, that's a much better thing to think, it was just getting going, it was struck down in its prime, you have all these ideas of potential and, injustice there, rather than watching a show you love turn into just mush and slop, and, you kind of don't feel a thing when you watch it get put out of its misery. I think... I feel like this is potentially where we were always going, but it doesn't help that we've got here in such a... what's the word I'm thinking of? Just a lack of dignity in getting there. I think maybe the show ending on Power of the Doctor objectively would have been better, because you can look at that era and say, well, yes, it went downhill, yes, people lost interest, but that was because of one guy, that was one showrunner who took something that was great and made it bad, and that was the fault. And then I think if you're HBO, you're Amazon, you're whoever, Netflix even, you can look at that and say, oh, well, when we bring the show back, we're not going to have that one guy, we're going to make it good, and that way it will be popular. Whereas kind of we brought in the man that can make it good and he didn't. It's not a great look for the company. So we'll just have to wait and see. It's one of those things that, it's almost silly to speculate about, because there might be an announcement in a week's time. But not only is it kind of useless to speculate because we just don't know, I don't really care to at the moment. I don't feel like I mind one way or the other whether the show finds a way to continue. And I think that's a really drastic way to feel. And it may be the recency bias of having, reality war in my mind, but I don't know. I think, I'm not on the edge of my seat wondering what's going to happen. I'm not joining in the discussion of like, oh, maybe the show will be back, or maybe, oh, look, guys, they said the show's not going anywhere. Calm down. Oh, they're doing a kids cartoon. That'll keep the show alive. I don't really feel as though it matters to me, and I think maybe that can change, and I think maybe if we get a few years down the line and there's no Doctor Who, I might start thinking, you know what, I could do with some Doctor Who right now. But yeah, as for now, I think the show is where it needs to be. Something else that could change it is the spin-off that we're getting next year, which everyone seems to be forgetting about, including Russell T Davies and the BBC. It's The War Between the Land and the Sea. Catchy title, I know. And I just think, it's possible that show comes along and is good, and it is at least something interesting set in this universe that kind of reminds us of the potential that we're missing out on, and but it could just be nothing. It could be kind of really bland, fine Doctor Who storytelling. The track record on spin-offs I don't feel is great, but you never know. And I think with Doctor Who, you do never know. Sometimes in a sea, no pun intended, of dreck, you can just get something that's this real nugget of brilliance. And that's happened across the last few years as well. So, that's another one we're just going to have to file under wait and see. And see has an A at the end. I think I've talked enough about all the things I wanted to cover in this video. I'm sorry it's been so long. Thank you so much if you've made it to the end. I know this probably could have been about 3 videos. It could have been the episodes I was talking about, the series as a whole, and where the show is at. But I'm starting teacher training as I'm filming this, literally like 2 days from now. So I know that I'm about to become incredibly busy. I don't know when/if I'm going to make it back to this channel. And I knew like another indefinite hiatus on the J-Boi Productions channel, having this unfinished business hang over that time would drive me insane. So thank you for persevering and sticking with this. And I'm sorry it's taken me so long. But yeah, I mean, talking about that, I'm going away, basically, on this channel for I don't know how long, but I would love to keep this as an outlet, to keep this as something I can come back to, share an opinion, discuss with you guys, because that's always been such a great part of it, is kind of throwing out my opinion and then having that kind of conversation on the other end of it. So please do let me know in the comments of this video how you feel about the second half of this season. Let me know each episode even, the season as a whole, and where the show is at, what you might think the show needs for the future, whether you kind of agree with me and that just nothing is maybe the best way forward for a bit, but I don't know. Yeah, keep that up. Follow me on Twitter. I'm going to continue being active there until the day I die. So if you kind of want to hear what I'm thinking about, what I'm watching, what's currently on my brain, that's the way forward for the time being. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for all the support you've given this channel for the last 5 years. It has been such a privilege and a joy to share my opinions here and have this kind of platform for myself. It's a narcissist's dream, isn't it? Just being able to waffle on your own for all this time and have people go, wow, this guy's making some good points. So yeah, no, I have really, really loved it. I hope to come back to it every now and then. There are holidays for teachers, I imagine. So if this is how I want to spend my holidays is another question entirely. But yeah, thank you so much for watching both now and all the previous videos. I will try and get those previous videos back up. I need to kind of do some edits on those and take them off unlisted. But I don't know. Yeah, just thank you so much, really. I love you lots. I hope you didn't notice that actually the bit I'm filming right now and the bit I filmed at the start of this video is a week apart because I managed to delete loads of my footage. If you saw the camera move, the light move, my hair move, I hope I got away with that. Let me know if I did. I'm interested in that. If you're just like, oh, we must have knocked the camera. Or if you're like, this is a different guy. This is a guy with a week's more experience. He's been in, traveling. He's seen the world in the time since he started this video. I'm waffling now because I just don't want this to end, but I'm sure you do. So goodbye. Love you lots.